Former WWE superstar JTG, real name Jason Paul, is out with a new ebook called Damn, Why Did I Write This Book? Great title, by the way. It's available right now for just $1.33. You can find the link to buy the book in his Twitter bio at JTG1284. I've read the book already. It is highly entertaining. JTG, how you doing, my friend?
How you doing, man? Everything is great. You know, just to get fans up to speed, I like to do a little introduction, see if they remember JTG. Yo, it's your boy JTG, a.k.a. the Human Torch, because I stays with the heat. Chill.
See, that is the best intro I think I've had for any interview I've ever done.
Just got to bring them up to speed,
That's how it is. At least people know it's the genuine article now here. It's not a reasonable facsimile. Now, the book is $1.33 right now. Then it hits Amazon this week for $2.99. It'll hit the Kindle store. You'll be able to download it all over the world, and it is well worth it. I have to say, shout out to you for the name, by the way. Jason's my first name, and Paul is my middle name, so I feel a certain I feel a certain kinship here. And I was born in Brooklyn too. What part of Brooklyn did you grow up in?
I grew up in Flatbush, between Flatbush and Ocean, right there on Parkside.
Ah, interesting. Okay, I was born and raised in Canarsie.
Oh, wow, okay.
So
I went to John Dewey High School.
Okay, well, I went to South Shore High School, which is not too far away.
Okay.
Now, we got to talk about the book title first. It's a play off the tweet that you sent when you got the call about your WWE release. You said, "Damn, why did I pick up my phone?" Which was hilarious. I thought kind of sad, too, just because they never really gave you much of a chance. I mean, was it a case where you pretty much saw the writing on the wall, like, yeah, I'm just running out the clock here, or did you think there may come a point where they would actually do something with you?
Oh, in the back of my head, you kind of saw the writing on the wall, but in the back of my head, every superstar, they want to remain optimistic. They want to have some sort of hope, I kind of saw the writing on the wall when I haven't been on the road for almost a year, and back of my head, I was saying, maybe they want to keep me off the road and keep me off the TV because they're going to bring me back with a new character. Hopefully. We'll see. And then when I got the call, it was kind of like a sigh of release at the same time. When I got the call, I wasn't that much down and depressed because I know WWE is not the end all to be all.
Sure.
And I had other projects I was working on too. And also when I got released on my contract, I was more free.
Now, was it a case where you had like a lot of time left on the contract and you couldn't really do much, or was your deal pretty much up at that point?
No. I had a few more months left. I believe I was my contract was due right around WrestleMania.
Now, the book is it's a collection of stories from your WWE career, from developmental to the main roster, back to developmental, back to the main roster. That seemed to be the pattern there. And it focuses on heat. So how does one acquire heat? What can one do to avoid heat? Having read the book, I'd say staying away from Shad Gaspard would seem to be like a good idea, probably. You were like a heat-seeking missile in WWE, and I think for the people who don't really understand, how hard is it to shake that once you have it, once you have heat?
To be honest with you, you can't avoid heat when you're stepping into that business. I hear a lot of individuals, I hear a lot of rookies. So how do I not get heat? I'm trying to get on everybody's good side and be cool with everybody. Like, you can't make everybody happy. You can't not avoid heat. You're gonna get heat. If you try not to get heat, you'll get heat for not trying to get heat. It's a ridiculous system back there. So you just gotta, if you love wrestling, you just gotta deal with it.
It's like a no-win situation.
Exactly. Just choose your battles. That's what I say. Choose your battles.
Yeah, I think Paul Heyman says, you just got to kind of pick what hill you want to die on.
Exactly.
Now, you realize at a very young age, this is what you wanted to do with your life. You went straight from high school to training to become a wrestler. When you got signed, you were only 21 years old. I mean, 21 years old. You say in your book you were the youngest African-American star to ever be active on the Raw roster, which is pretty cool. In hindsight, do you think you would have benefited from spending more time in OVW, just as far as learning the do's and don'ts of working in WWE, or is it a case where, being down there could never really prepare you for being in that locker room on the main roster?
Well, I was in OVW for 3 years before I got signed, so I pretty much got a good gist of what was going on. And you can never be prepared for what the WWE is going to throw at you. When I got called, I'm kind of glad that I got thrown to the wolves like that, because it was a quick learning experience. But I also had some brothers out there that looked out for me, who took me under their wing. I had Armando Estrada, I had Elijah Burke, and Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. We worked with them, and we wrote with them, and they also brought us up to speed on the do's and don'ts of the wrestling business.
That's good. I mean, it's kind of like you guys were just looking out for each other, because I would imagine some of them were probably in the same situation where they didn't really know what to expect.
Exactly.
Now, you and Shad, you started out as the Gang Stars. You ended up as Crime Time. Whose idea was it for the name, by the way?
Actually, it was Shad. It was me and Abraham Washington who were Gang Stars.
Right.
We were the Gang Stars, and then Abraham Washington had some personal issues in OVW that he couldn't go to training anymore. And then I was left on my own, and Paul Heyman put Shad and I together. And we won the Southern Tag Team titles the very next week on OVW television. And then a few weeks later, we did some vignettes. And the writers showed Vince, from what I heard, the writers showed Vince, and Vince loved the vignettes so much, he said, bring him up on the road. Shad had a contract at the time at OVW, but I didn't have a contract. So I got signed, and we was brought up to Raw the next week. Not to wrestle, but to, it was getting us used to the road.
Now, when they put you and Shad together for the first time, were you Crime Time with that name from day one, or did you get the Crime Time name once you came to the main roster?
No, we got Crime Time when we got to the main roster. I remember we was looking for names because we was getting thrown so many different names that we were going to use. We shot down. Some were taken already. The whole trademark process, the whole legal process. I remember one name that I was hoping that didn't get through was Hoodie Nation.
Oh.
Crime Time almost got called Hoodie Nation, and they was going to give us a flag and everything. I was like, oh gosh, you're not going to make it.
You would have been done in 3 months.
Crime Time fit. We changed the spelling, and that's what she wrote.
Now, you made your Raw debut in 2006. I mean, really from day one, the stories you share in the book of how you two would end up in trouble, a lot of times it was really through no fault of your own, or maybe Shad would say something that would rub somebody the wrong way, but you'd also get in trouble for it. I think we sometimes forget when you're part of a tag team, you're relying on that other person to not screw up, because if they do, that affects you too, right? It's your ass as well.
Oh, yeah, correct. But I knew that going in. I heard stories about the Rockers. I heard stories about other tag teams where one individual would do something and they both took the blunt of it. So I knew what I was getting myself into.
Now, what did you like better, doing the singles thing that came later on, or the tag team thing?
With my career personally, I had more fun doing the Crime Time gimmick with Shad.
Okay, so like if it were a longer term thing, you'd feel more comfortable being in a tag team as opposed to just kind of going one-on-one?
No, I like the singles. I'm talking about my career. I prefer, like every wrestler, they want to go the singles route.
Sure.
But with my wrestling span with 8 years, I've had the most fun doing the tag team.
Gotcha. Now, Steve Austin, he interviewed Vince McMahon on the WWE Network. He said, in the locker room, it feels like all these young guys, the mid-card guys, are walking around on eggshells. They're afraid to make waves. And for those guys to get over on their own, Vince's own advice in his own words was, don't piss anybody off. Well, pissing the wrong people off is a theme throughout your book. What Vince said there, though, would seem to back up something that you said on Twitter a few years ago when you said, nobody wants to speak up. Everybody's afraid of losing their jobs or getting taken off TV. Do you think it's hypocritical of them to, let's say on the one hand, say, you need to find a way to be different, get yourself over, but don't piss anybody off or else?
Yeah, that's an oxymoron. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And then also there's been examples where superstars have went out their way, got outside the box, and they still haven't been pushed. Example is Zack Ryder. He was kind of like the locker room's last hope. This guy busts his ass. He was on the road, and he'll go home and film and edit and put out these shows every week, and that was getting millions of views. And they were chanting his name. They wanted Zack Ryder. And in the locker room, he's like, oh, God, we could, if this guy does it, we can too. And then when we saw that he was getting buried with these ridiculous stories, like he was getting TV, but, being on TV doesn't always being on TV is not always great. It depends on how you're being used.
Sure. So
when we saw him on TV and he was getting buried, it was kind of like, wow, why are you doing this then? This guy busts his ass. So why are we going to, it kind of just killed the morale. It was very discouraging for the locker room.
Well, it was almost like they resented him for it in a weird way, the fact that he got himself over, and I never really could understand that. I was in the building at Madison Square Garden, I think it was the Survivor Series a few years ago. They had The Rock in the main event, And I mean, The Rock was over, but when the show was over and they went off the air, you had 15,000 people chanting Zack Ryder's name to the point where The Rock had to stop and acknowledge it. And you almost thought, okay, maybe this is like a big coming out moment for the guy, but it just felt like every time he would kind of get up that step, they resented him for it. And as a fan, I saw that. I can never really understand why.
They knocked him right back down. He's like, yeah. And the thing about it too, like Zack Ryder's a very cool guy. He was humble. Usually if you had that type of response, you kind of brag in and like, look, I'm so over and blah. No, he was very humble about it. He was a very cool guy, laid back, and he was like, this hard work. The hard work paid off. He didn't have to say anything. The work showed for it.
How approachable is Vince McMahon these days? I mean, most of the stories you hear from years ago were that he was always accessible. He even liked it when guys would knock on his door and approach him about things. I mean, is it still like that today?
When I was there, he was very approachable, and I could knock on his door, and I would go to knock on his door about business. I wouldn't go knock on his door and ask him how was his day doing, or did you ask him about the media or entertainment. It was always strictly business, and he was always his door was always wide open.
Did you find a similar thing with Triple H there at the end, in the times that you would either deal with him or had to deal with him for another reason? I mean, are they similar in that respect, or is there a big difference there?
Absolutely night and day.
Wow.
I had a very difficult time getting a hold of Hunter on multiple occasions, and it was never easy. And that's why I think the company, I'd rather keep Vince as the main big dog in charge.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're not one of these guys that thinks, oh, he's out of touch. He needs to get out of there.
I do think he's out of touch. I do think that in the creative team and the writing team, I think they need to have more people of different backgrounds and different age groups, because there is definitely a generation gap, but that they could help Vince, let him know what's trending, what's popular, what memes are,
Right. Now, you talk in the book, you talk about the handshaking ritual. Fans have heard a lot of tales about handshaking over the years. I think maybe one of the more famous stories involves the Young Bucks. I think they were there for a tryout. They didn't shake a certain someone's hand, and it may have cost them a job. I mean, to me, it sounds completely ludicrous, but the handshaking ritual, it's a real thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's very, very real. That was the first thing that was taught to me. I remember Elijah Burke. The first thing he said, when you go into this building, you shake everybody's hand, or else you'll get serious heat. Then I had to ask him what heat is, and he broke that down to me. Okay, I was like, okay, so shake everybody's hand. Okay, got it. And then I was so scared, I remember shaking people's hands twice because I couldn't remember if I shook their hand or not, because there's so much people.
Now, is that from the talent on down to the referees, or is it just the wrestlers?
Talent, referees, talent and referees, everybody, officials, people, the office, everybody.
Man, that's got to suck if you're OCD. You got to go around shaking everybody's hand with like a bottle of Purell in your back pocket.
Oh yeah, you got to keep that handy.
Jeez. Now in the book you say, I want to quote you here in the book, you say, I sometimes can't believe the petty lengths that people in that company will go to punish other people. There's a story, and we'll just leave it at this, but there's a story about a hair braiding incident, which sounds even more ridiculous when I say that out loud, a hair braiding incident. Involving your partner, which led to both of you getting punished. At the end of the book, one of the things I loved about the book, at the very end, you have a list of heat commandments that you run through. And I think people, when they get to that part, will enjoy it. Just give us some examples, whether it's from that list or just in general, of the kind of petty stuff that could possibly earn you a trip to the doghouse.
Oh, man, like, for example, catering. You just want to go there, enjoy lunch, and you're not even thinking about certain stuff. You get up, go get yourself a drink. You got heat. Because you get heat. You get heat because when you got up to get yourself something to drink, there's other people around the table. Did you ask them if they wanted something? It's like, I'm not a bad, individual's not a bad person. He wasn't thinking about that. It's like he didn't intentionally say, I'm not going to get these people nothing. I'm just going to get. It's like people sometimes they are in their own world.
Of course.
But they don't let that slide.
Oh my God. It's funny. Like I would love to hear like a non-wrestling fan, somebody who knows nothing about this, like hear these stories and read your book, and just put a camera there and just like watch their reaction as they read these different. I mean, they wouldn't believe it to be real.
Oh no! Like Bret Hart's book says, the cartoon world of wrestling.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And by the way, there's a story in there about speaking of heat, the heat you got for using the wrong hand motions during your entrance. I think people,
Oh,
I think people when they read it, they can pretty much figure out who you're talking about. Just so you know,
yeah,
in the interest of full disclosure here, as a kid, I also danced around to this guy's theme music in my underwear, so you have nothing to be ashamed of.
yeah. So all the fans is readers, don't judge me. Everybody did it.
Now, there's a great wrestler's court story in there that you share. People are fascinated by the idea of wrestler's court. Just talk a little bit about like what the purpose of it is, how it works, and to your knowledge, I know it's been almost a year since you've been out of there, but is wrestler's court even still a thing in WWE anymore?
I think I was the last. You know what? I wasn't the last case of wrestler's court. I thought I was, but I forgot there was another individual who's not on the roster anymore that went to wrestler's court. And I'm not going to say the individual who the individual is, but I remember he couldn't dress in the male's locker room for like 2 or 3 months. That was his sentence. That wasn't so bad, I could deal with that.
Yeah, that seems kind of lenient compared to what it could have been.
Yeah, sometimes there'll be incidents where a wrestler. I heard stories where wrestlers, they had to carry other wrestlers' bags for a couple of months, or take the other person out for dinner after a show. For a couple of months, they have to fit the bill. Yeah, I heard a few stories.
Now, you and Shad had heat with Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch that ended with you guys losing your jobs back in 2007. They got to stay. What was their beef with you? I mean, was there something that happened behind the scenes that provoked things, or were they just bullying people? I mean, what was the deal there?
We just didn't get along. They had, and to me, my opinion, they had they had a very negative attitude backstage, and I've heard that with several other superstars that they just had a negative attitude, and when we worked with them, it was just magnified because we were the new cool kids on the block, and we were relatively over in the short span that we got there, and I think that increased the hate towards us.
Yeah, because I remember reading about, and you talk about it in the book too, that one house show incident. I think you guys were punished right after that. And I don't recall if they were punished in any way. I mean, eventually they brought you back, but I just remember, reading about that and thinking, I couldn't imagine what could have happened if there was some kind of personal issue, or it could have just been one of those things where, look, some guys get along and some guys don't.
We didn't get along at all. Before when we first got the Lance Cade, before we started working Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, Lance Cade was really cool with us. He was really cool. It wasn't until we started working with him, and then we started having backstage issues.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that as over as Crime Time was at your height of popularity, you guys never had a tag title run. I mean, everybody gets a tag title run, but not you guys. Was there any talk? I mean, I'm talking like serious talk of putting those titles on you?
Yeah, on 2 instances, I believe we were supposed to get tag team title runs. One is in the book, and the other one is going to be in part 2.
So there is going to be a part 2.
Oh yeah, the fans are demanding it, man. I mean, I'm getting a lot of good feedback, and so there's got to be a part 2.
Well, this one,
and there's a lot of stories I left out of part 1. Like I was talking to my co-author, my wife, and the editor, and it was like there were so many stories, like you just can't put them all in one book, And plus, wrestling fans, they have a short attention span. They want to get straight to the juicy stuff, and it's got to be a quick read.
Now, what and that's what this book is, by the way. I mean, like I said, I read the book. It took me less than a day to read the whole thing, and it was entertaining through and through. So I think that's the right formula. What happened to the feud with you and Shad? I remember they shot the angle on SmackDown where he turned on you. You guys had, I think it was a strap match at the next pay-per-view, and then it was pretty much over after that, right? Is that when they released Shad?
No, Shad was there for a few months, and then he was sent to what was the name of the school in Tampa, FCW, for a few months, and then they released him.
So, I mean, was that supposed to go on for longer than it did? I mean, I would imagine you guys, I would think you guys as friends were probably excited maybe about working together, and it just seemed like they cut that off pretty quick. I mean, did you have ideas of where you wanted to go with it? Was it supposed to go longer?
No, the blow-off match was the strap match. I think we had one more match after that on the Superstars, and Shad won, and that was it. There was no plans after. There was no plans after that.
Talk a little bit about what led to your Twitter, I guess we'll call it tirade in 2012, because some people might look at that and say, oh, he was just bitter at the time. He was a lower card guy. But the reality is, I mean, you were standing up not only for yourself, but for the entire locker room, and it paid off in the end.
Oh, it definitely paid off in the end. I don't want to get into too much details.
Sure.
The stories is in the book, and it's a very good, entertaining read. Some of the situations are very serious, but with my writing style, I like to make it very comical, hilarious, and entertaining.
Now, I have to say the Cena story, and I should tell people, JTG has a knack for not naming names in the book while saying just enough so that I think you can pretty much figure out who he's talking about. So he doesn't say John Cena or this person or that person. That's me. But let's call this person the Champ. The Champ actually pops up quite a few times in your book. He seems like quite the shit stirrer in certain parts of it, actually. I want people to read it. It's the story about the magazine quote and the aftermath of that. It's just unbelievable to me. Tyler Rex has told the story a whole bunch of times about Cena and the burning hammer. I don't know if you've heard that one before.
Yeah, I heard that. Tyler Rex is a good friend of mine.
Yeah, and he seems like a cool guy, and I've heard him tell that story a whole bunch of times. I mean, you hear stuff like that, and it's like this weird insecurity that some of those top guys seem to have. I don't know if that's kind of the vibe you get too. That's kind of my read on it.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're on top and they want to stay on top. And anybody who gets close to getting on top, they're gonna kick them down before they even get anywhere close.
Right. It's like protecting their territory in a way.
Exactly.
Now that leads into a bigger question. You talk about the mentality of some of the top stars in WWE. Not a guy like Jericho. I know you think very highly of him, and Jericho's one of those guys who goes out of his way to help the younger guys and the newer guys. So not him, but certain other top guys who maybe are not as helpful. You talk about that, and it ties into why there will never be a wrestlers' union. Why do you think that is? I mean, your stance on that, I mean, you make it pretty clear. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is just not something that is likely to happen?
The top guys like their pull that they have. And for them, in order to have a union, that will make everybody on the same playing level. And top guys don't want that. Or certain individual top guys wanted that. I remember there was supposed to be a union in the 80s and somebody snitched. I'm not going to say any names, and then that ended that. and there might be one soon. There was talks about one, and there was rumblings, and then it stopped. But there might be another one. It's definitely possible.
So there were rumblings of something like that, though, while you were there.
Oh yeah, talent was getting pissed off, and all it takes is for some talent not to show up on a flight. What are you going to do? Let's say you have a pay-per-view match, and let's say talent is pissed off, and you got a big pay-per-view. And those talent don't get on their flight. You're going to have to listen to what they got to say.
That's right. You don't have any bodies to put in the ring. You have no show.
Exactly. If talent knew how much power they had, but they're scared.
Now, I want to ask you about NXT here for a second. Now, I know you were a coach on the this is back a completely different time when NXT was a show. I think it was on Sci-Fi. They had NXT Redemption, I think was the season that you were a coach on. Was that the never-ending season that just went on and on?
Yeah, one minute I was told it was only going to last a few months, and then it just kept going on and on and on, never-ending story. My rookie was eliminated. I was still on the show. It was like, okay.
I remember that because I think, if I remember correctly, you actually had, I don't know if this was a regular thing, but you had a talk show segment. They had like spray-painted garbage cans in the background, and I think you interviewed Yoshi Tatsu for one of them. And I remember thinking, like, this is pretty good. Like, he's pretty entertaining in the role, but yet I never saw, like, they never gave you the chance to do that on Raw or like the main shows.
Yeah, man. That four-letter word, heat.
Always comes back to heat.
Always comes back to heat.
But on the subject of NXT, the reason I bring it up, I wanted to get your perspective on this. And I know you've been out again. It's going to be almost a year, I think, since you've been in the company. But in that time, NXT as a brand has taken off. I think a lot of those indie guys they signed that have kind of been carrying that brand were signed in the months after you left the company. But I think even when you were still there, probably at the tail end, NXT was getting a lot of buzz. People were talking about it and raving about it. As somebody who was on the roster at that time, how does that affect, I guess, the guys on the main roster, especially the lower card guys who are probably a hell of a lot better then we get to see them on TV. They don't get a lot of chances. Now everybody's talking about how great the NXT guys are, and they wrestle long matches. How does that affect the guys on the main roster? Do they resent any of the NXT talent for it, or what was your perspective on that?
With me personally, like when I was there was new talent coming up from NXT, but that never really affected me or confidence. With me personally, I knew I had a lot to bring to the table. I had a lot of charisma, personality, and if somebody was on that same level as me, I knew I could always turn it up more.
But I mean, do you think it's a good thing in that? Does it create some sense of competition between the guys on the main roster and the guys in developmental when everybody is raving about their shows and their matches? I mean, does that have any sort of like mental effect on the guys that are in the mid card on the main roster?
Oh, definitely going to have some competition, but it depends on how confident you are as a talent. You know, if you're insecure, then you're definitely going to be affected by it. But someone like me, I knew if I was given the ball, I had enough confidence to take the ball and run with it and score a touchdown.
The running joke for so long was, I didn't even know JTG was still employed. I mean, that's how little they were using you to where it became a punchline every time they would have cuts and your name wasn't on the list. He's hiding, he's not answering his phone, which may be true. I don't know. I mean, who knows? But and then last June they dropped the axe. Was there anxiety every time they would start putting those names up on the website? I think like Black Friday they would sometimes call it. Or were you at the point where you really just didn't give a shit anymore? I mean, what was going through your mind that day when you found out?
It was kind of a sigh of relief. Some superstars, when they get released, talents think that, oh, they got fired. I mean, not talent. Fans think they got fired. Oh, it's the end of the world. Some talent want to be released. They're at home, they're getting a check. They're already setting their ducks up and getting stuff lined up for the next chapter in their life. Like I said, the WWE is not the end all, the be all.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like guys are finding that out more often now. I mean, you've had so many alternatives out there: Lucha Underground, Ring of Honor. I mean, I think the sense I get is that a lot of guys are realizing, hey, I can make money outside of WWE. My world won't collapse if I go work somewhere else. I don't know if that was necessarily the case, a few years ago, but it seems like that's more of the prevailing mentality these days.
I definitely agree. There's more places to go do your craft. And I recommend that wrestlers, former WWE superstars, they go outside the box and do something else and brand themselves outside of wrestling.
Now, you were employed by WWE for 8 years. I mean, that's a long time. Are you surprised you lasted that long, given all the nonsense that played itself out along the way?
I'm definitely surprised. When people did, when I was passionate about getting higher up in the totem pole. When people got released and I wasn't being used, it was definitely a sigh of relief. I was like, "Ooh, okay, I got another chance to prove myself."
Now, it wasn't all bad. I mean, we're talking about a lot of the bad stuff that happened to you, and the book is largely about how you got heat with different people and how to avoid it and stuff like that. But you being in WWE was a fantasy that became a reality. I mean, they're bringing back Tough Enough. And they're airing these videos on TV every week with these kids talking about what a dream come true it would be for them to be in WWE. I mean, that was you once upon a time. That was probably most of us once upon a time, but you actually made it happen. What are some of the more positive things you took away from your time in WWE?
And just to throw this out, I did do a Tough Enough video. I hope they never find it.
Oh, you did? Oh! I have to see this.
I hope they never find it. I did it in my buddy's living room, and I think I did do one? I did two, actually. Yeah.
Now, was that for those are for the earlier seasons, not the new one?
Oh yeah, I think it was like the second or third season. Yeah.
Okay, I got to make sure. I want to make sure JTG's not looking to get on Tough Enough next month.
Oh gosh, never that. No. And if anybody any Tough Enough contestants is listening to this interview, I recommend you read this book, and it might change your mind. What you're about to get into.
Yeah, it's got a lot of very valuable lessons, I think, if you fall into that category.
What was your question again? I'm sorry, I ran off into the Tough Enough.
just what are some of the more positive things you took away from your time in WWE?
Well, definitely, I lived out a childhood dream. I think anybody who's really passionate about being a professional wrestler or being a WWE superstar, I say go for it. Don't make decisions on somebody else's experience. You have to go live it out for yourself. And being a WWE superstar, you get to travel the world and get paid for it. You make a bond with the locker room. The locker room, there's a brotherhood bond that will last forever. I will see. I might not speak to them every day, but if I see Zack Ryder or Dolph Ziggler or Bray Wyatt 6 months from now, we pick up right where we left off.
Now, you mentioned Dolph Ziggler. I think it was his brother, actually, Ryan, that edited your book. Is that correct?
Yeah, you helped edit the book. Yeah, you still got some more work to do.
Now with Dolph, I know, like you said, you count him among your friends still in WWE. Dolph's a funny guy. I know he's doing some stand-up comedy on the side when he's not wrestling. If I were to ask you who the funniest guy on the roster was behind the scenes, someone the fans might never expect, who would it be?
Oh, I think they expected this, but Santino Marella is hilarious. He's just a hilarious guy. Funny.
Well, there's also the classic Cell of the Cobra. I think that was one of your last matches in WWE.
Oh, yeah. And I enjoyed taking it every single time. I think that's what got me in trouble. I had too much fun selling that move.
Well, can't have too much fun. You'll get heat.
Exactly.
I know you and Kofi are friends or frenemies, as you say in the book. What do you think of this New Day gimmick they're doing right now?
I don't get it. I'll be honest. I really don't get it. I don't understand the premise behind it. There's, all three superstars are talented. Kofi, man, he's just a human highlight reel, and Big E, I definitely see him as a top guy. But I really don't know what the New Day gimmick is.
Think we'll see you back in WWE one day?
I don't think so, no.
I was going to say, would you even want to with all the stuff that you went through?
I have no desire right now to be on the road full time with the WWE. I love the WWE. I love the wrestling business. I love wrestling, but I'm not in love with it.
So I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. So what is JTG up to these days? I know you are making indie appearances with Shad. It sounds like you're doing some other stuff. Anything big coming up that you would want people to know about?
I'm staying real busy. I have a movie coming out in July called Bad Night with these two YouTube stars. Their names are Lauren Elizabeth and Jen McAllister. They got over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. The studios decided to give them a film, and I'm in there chasing them around California. So the movie's called Bad Night. So yes, look out for that in July.
What kind of movie is it?
It's a dark comedy. It reminds me of Superbad, but this time with two high school females.
Chasing them around California, you say?
They're chasing them around California. They get into a wrong taxi cab, and my Russian boss, we're his henchmen, and we have to retreat, get them back.
So now you have a Russian boss instead of an Irish one. Well, let's let people know how they can find you online. I know you're on Twitter and Instagram, so let people know how they can reach you.
Yeah, they can reach me at Twitter at JTG1284. They can reach me on Instagram, JTG121084. And there's a new social media app. I will be doing a Q&A using this app. It's a self-destructing voice messaging app that lets you use sound effects while you're recording. So ask me a question, I'll respond with it using Earsay. And I'm going to be sending some real funny sound bites over the net, over Twitter.
Wow, very cool. And again, the name of the book, it's Damn, Why Did I Write This Book? It's available starting this week on Amazon for just $2.99. And does that come with an extra chapter?
It's funny you asked that. I wrote an extra chapter, and my editor, it was so funny, he said, save that for part 2. I was like,
He's giving you some good advice.
Too good. He said it was too good. He said save it for part 2. I was like, all right.
He's spoken like a true editor. And by the way, $2.99, since the WWE Network is free yet again for new subscribers this month, you could take that money that you would have spent on the network and buy 3 copies of JTG's book and still have money left over. That's how good of a deal this is. So
sounds good.
Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I had a lot of fun reading it. JTG, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on here.
All right, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this special Sound Off Extra. You can, of course, listen to brand new full episodes of the Solomonster Sounds Off each and every Sunday on the Solomonster.com, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn Radio. So until next time, he is JTG. I am the Solomonster. Be well, stay safe, and we will see you back here real soon. Take care, guys.
Cheer.